Hello students, welcome to Learner's Planet. Let us continue with the chapter Diversity in Living Organisms. Now this is the third theory session of this chapter, and till now I have already explained that what is the basic concept of diversity. Diversity means existence or occurrence of varied living forms in our surrounding, right? And of course when such type of variations are there, now this leads to the occurrence of millions of species in our surrounding. Further, it is really not so easy to understand each and every organism or the species of these living organisms to understand separately. And thus I explained you the concept of classification, its importance, and how the organisms are basically classified. That is a criteria, the criteria which is used to classify the organisms. Now after doing this thing, next I have to explain you that if the classification is taking place. See, I hope you know what is classification now. Classification is the arrangement, a systematic scientific arrangement of living organisms into groups and subgroups, depending upon their similarities or the dissimilarities, right? So such type of arrangement results in the generation of the groups. Now if you look at this concept from other side, then what I can say, that of course again there is the diverse living forms in our surrounding. Now the point is, are all these diverse living forms, they have arisen on the earth, on our planet, in a single day, at the time when the life originated for the first time on this planet? No, it is not like that. These diverse living forms or these varied living forms, they came into existence gradually. Initially they were very simple organisms, and from there slowly with the change in the surroundings and the adaptation process, the natural selection process, and through different ways the new organisms they came into existence, right? So in today's session I'm going to discuss about the concept or the relation between the classification and the evolution. So how this evolution occurred, or how can we relate the process of evolution with classification? That is now what we have to understand further. Well, before understanding the relation between classification and evolution, I would like you to understand the definition of these two terms. I have already explained, I have already defined the term classification, right? It is what? The arrangement of living organisms into groups and subgroups, right? Now, classification actually help in categorizing the living organisms, and this is very clear from the definition. If you have to understand the living organisms, then of course there is no requirement to go through to study each and every individual organism. Rather, if you understand the characteristic features of a particular group of organisms, then that must be applied on that individual organism of the same population, right? So here is the concept that this classification is thus very important. Now the point is, as the changes are taking place, the process of evolution will occur. What is evolution? Evolution is defined as a complex process by which the characteristics of living organisms changes due to various factors, and then these changes are inherited from one generation to the another. See, variation is basically a change, right? Whenever the reproduction is taking place, whenever the new progenies are arising, whenever new offsprings are generated or they are produced by the existing living organisms, definitely at that time some error may occur. Error in terms of DNA sequence. You must be knowing that the gene is the hereditary unit of life, right? The characters are transmitted from one generation to the next generation in the form of genes, right? So these genes are transferred, I'm sorry. So when such type of genes are transferred or they are copied to be transferred into the next generation, error may occur. which may change the sequence of DNA in these particular genes, right? And due to such type of changes, the characteristic may be changed, isn't it? Now, as this change occur now, this will lead to the generation of a new characteristic, or it may lead to the disappearance of some another particular characteristic, or it may happen that at the same time or in the same generation it may not be expressed. It may not affect the individual, but it may affect the next generation. So there is there is a complex series of such things that might be happening during such type of processes. Which type of processes? The reproduction processes. Fine. Now, when such type of changes that are arising during the process of reproduction, if they accumulate in the next generations, once they are happening, definitely they are going to be inherited, isn't it? So during during such type of heredity, there must be some accumulation of different changes, right? And if I compare the organism with the from their forefathers, like ancestors, a million years ago, the forefathers or the ancestors that must have been existing in a previous era, then what conclusion can we draw here? Definitely, there must be there must be great differences between these two organisms, such that they may not even recognize each other, isn't it? So, such type of accumulation of changes, they can lead to the generation of even a new species. Or if I do not consider a new species, then I'm not wrong to say that there must be, or there may be the occurrence or the existence or appearance of some new characters within the species or within the organism. So this accumulation of change, which change? The change in the genes, right? So such type of altered genes are the base for the process of evolution. Now from this point, can you relate it with the diversity? As this type of changes occurs, it leads to the changes in the characteristic features. And as these changes occurs, definitely what will happen? Then varied living forms will arise. So now you can understand this thing. Now when this variation occur, or when there is a change in the characteristic, we get the base so as to subclassify the organisms. Got my point? So this is how the classification and evolution is interlinked. These two processes, they are interdependent or they are closely related to each other. Now another thing is that evolution is thus responsible for the generation and shaping of the diversity in our surrounding. And these two things, they are based on the variations, and variations are basically due to different factors which may be environmental also, right? And definitely in the existing conditions, the organisms which are able to survive, right, those which are able to adapt to the natural conditions, they will survive, the others will be vanished away. So I can say that evolution leads to the generation and shaping of the diversity by environmental selection. Although variation is leading to the changes in the characters, but whether it is suitable for the existing conditions or not, that will decide the survival of the organism. And such a process in which the environment is actually selecting, the nature is selecting the best fit organism, that process is known as the environmental selection, or it is known as the natural selection. Now during such a course, although the new organisms are generated or the new species are generating, but it never means that the complex forms or the new living forms which has been produced, they are better than the other previous organisms or the simple organisms which existed in the old era. It is never so. Evolution is simply leading to the generation of diversity, the introduction of new characteristics, or the removal of various other characteristic features. isn't it? But in this case, it is of course not so that the characters which were existing in the past era, they are better than the existing ones or the new ones. Rather, how this evolution is working is that whenever there is the variation taking place, it leads to the increase in the complexity of the features. So it is related to the generation of more complex organisms. And now again, these complex organisms, they are better than the other ones or the simple ones. Again, I am wrong to say this thing. The right thing that should be stated is that the complex forms, they are equally important, and they are I'm sorry, equally they are I'm sorry, equally they are good enough. And of course, for instance, you can understand the fact that even in today's era, right, in the present conditions, the simple unicellular organisms are also existing. They are also living in our surrounding. So if these new complex forms are better than those simpler ones, then those simpler ones should not survive. But it is not truth, right? Truth is that both complex and simple organisms, they are able to survive in the conditions, in the existing conditions, depending on their own adaptation. Fine. So this is how evolution is actually helping in the generation of diversity and generation of new complex forms without affecting the existence of the simple organisms. Well, at this point, one thing could be said that in the course of evolution, organisms which existed earlier, they must be primitive, and in these primitive forms further the new variations occurs, and this leads to the generation of the complex ones. So these organisms, they may be classified into two categories now, that is primitive and the advanced. So let me explain you this concept now. So students, now already I said that organisms, they are classified as the primitive and the advanced organisms. On the basis of what? On the basis of accumulation of the changes during the course of evolution. Right? So now here is the flowchart which is showing the comparison between the primitive and the advanced organisms. Right. So basically the primitive organisms, they are having the simple body organization. Now this simple body organization is definitely in comparison with the organisms. The organism which is having the complex body design. Right. So in case I can say that if you are comparing the two organisms, the one which is having the simple organization, that must be a primitive organism, and the one which is having the complex organization, that must belong to the advanced category. Second thing is that these organisms, that is primitive or the advanced, they are having this body design as a result of accumulation of variations, right? So these simple organisms, they must have evolved previously in the course of evolution. This is why they are having the simple body, isn't it? In the earlier slide, I already explained that evolution is responsible for the shaping and generation of diversity, right? So as the evolution proceeds, there is some variation which comes into the organism or in the line of organisms, right? And this results in the change in the body design. So the one which is having simple body, they must have evolved earlier, and thus they are having the ancient body design. And this is the reason that they are placed at first ladder on the evolutionary scale. Alternatively, if I compare the advanced organisms, then definitely they must be having the recent body design, or they must be more altered, more complex than the other primitive organisms. And of course, if they are having the more complex or the recent body design, so in the evolutionary scale, they must be placed at the successive ladders. So from this particular comparison, now you can say easily that the organisms that are ancient and simple or the primitive, they must be older. They must have arisen earlier in this evolutionary path, right? And the organisms which are having complex body designs, they must be younger as compared to the older forms, or as compared to the primitive organisms. So this is a simple comparison. Let us say, for example, there are two organisms. Let me say there is a prokaryotic organism and the eukaryotic, a unicellular eukaryotic organism. So what do you think? Which is having more complex characteristic features? Definitely, this prokaryotic cell, it must be simpler as compared to the eukaryotic organism, right? So out of these two, the prokaryotic, it must be a primitive organism, whereas the eukaryotic organism, it must be a advanced organism. Now, of course, they both have evolved in a very past time, but comparatively, the prokaryotes are primitive and the eukaryotic organisms are the advanced forms. And of course, when we proceed further, you will compare. I can compare these multicellular organisms with these unicellular. So now, in this context, this unicellular is simple or it is primitive, whereas the multicellular must be advanced. So this is how you need to compare the organisms so as to classify them as the primitive or the advanced forms. Now, as this type of comparison I'm sorry, if this type of comparison is made out here, then another point of view will come in front of our eyes now. That is, if such type of progressive evolution is taking place, definitely there must be some hierarchy established among these organisms. There must be simpler forms. Above that must be placed more complex, then more complex, and then more complex. And as we proceed, or as we look into these categories, I can say one thing, that as the group of organism is increasing, right, as the size of this group is increasing, you can observe there are the subgroups within this big group which are having the similar characteristics, as well as the subgroups which are having the dissimilar characteristics. So on this type of based on these type of relationships, there is the hierarchy establishment, right? And thus there are taxonomic groups also. So let us see what is that now. Well, I hope you remember what is taxonomy. Taxonomy is a branch of science which deals with the study of classification of organisms, right? So, well, the main aim of the taxonomic study is definitely to place the organisms in a systematic framework of classification, right? Now, this type of arrangement of the organisms into groups and in the hierarchical manner is actually known as the taxonomic hierarchy. Why? Because here we are observing the hierarchy in the living organisms, in the group of organisms. Thus, we are calling such type of arrangement as the taxonomic hierarchy. And according to this taxonomic hierarchy, the groups are actually arranged in a definite order from higher to lower categories. That means these groups are present. The more complex or the larger group of organisms, that will be placed at a higher level, and then the subclassification occurs, which divides this large group into smaller ones. And as these groups are broken into smaller groups, definitely the hierarchy is going to be established, right? The categories are formed which are in the descending manner. Now this descending manner in terms of what? In terms of number of organisms, as well as the similarities and the dissimilarities. Fine. Now in this case, each category, right, in this arrangement is scientifically known as taxon or the rank, right? The plural form of this taxon is the taxa. So taxa or categories, these categories are used with respect to the plants or the animals. And you know what are these rank? These are the kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Further, species are definitely subdivided into subspecies or varieties and so on, right? But the main hierarchical level or the taxa are the kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and the species. Fine. In the case of plants, kingdom is subdivided into the division. In this case, the word phylum is replaced with the term division. Just remember this point whenever you are following the classification, right? So now let me explain each and every taxa to you, and I will definitely help you to understand the concept behind each class, right? With examples, I will try to clarify the concept. Well, here is a picture which is showing the this entire group which is subdivided into subgroups. See this kingdom, which is the largest block here, which is comprised of inner small segments. So the smallest segment of group is which one? It is the species. That means this species is the taxa in which the smallest number of organisms must be present. It must be comprised of minimum number of organisms, right? Whereas the kingdom is the largest group of organisms. That means it is comprised of maximum number of organisms, and definitely it will include all these different types of organisms, right? Now further, besides this, this subdivision is shown here, and this subdivision is basically in the form, it is on the basis of the dissimilarities. See, there is a large kingdom here. When the dissimilarity comes here, it is subdivided into phylum or in the form of division. Phylum if you are following the animal kingdom, division if you are studying about the plant kingdom, right? And further, these are classified into order. So phylum or division, it will be comprised of a single order or more than that, right? Accordingly. Fine. Now what exactly it means, let me explain that. Well, students, the topmost taxonomic category is the kingdom, right? Taxonomic category, that means of course the rank or the taxa, and this particular group, it contains the maximum number of organisms. Now one thing should be clear in your mind, and you know what, that these organisms which are present in the kingdom, of course the number is maximum, right? But they are having the minimum similarities among them. This is really very important to understand. And for example, I can just say that according to two kingdom system, all organisms, they are classified into two kingdoms. You know which one? The kingdom Animalia and the kingdom Plantae. This kingdom Animalia is comprised of all animals, right? And Plantae is comprised of all the plants. Now, at this point, you can say that there are two kingdoms, right? There is a living zone, which is comprised of all the living organisms, and all this living world is divided into the two kingdoms. One kingdom, which is comprised of only animals. So you know very well what are the important characteristic features of animals. These animals, they are made up of eukaryotic cells. They are motile. They can reproduce by sexual as well as asexual method, depending on the type of organism. And within this Animalia group, you can observe that there are many different types of animals, isn't it? So even in the same kingdom, which are all made up of and which are all comprised of animals, they are having a lot of dissimilarities with each other. Same is true for plants. In this plant world, even if you go in a garden, you can see that there are so many different types of plants. There are shrubs, there are herbs, there are trees, there is grass, there are flowering plants, there are ornamental plants, and so on. So you can observe in a local area that there are a wide variety of organisms, that is plants or animals. So that is what I am saying here, that in this kingdom, it is the topmost taxonomic group, right? But it, of course, it is having the maximum number of organisms, but these organisms share very less similarities. They have a little bit less common properties or common characteristic features between them. So this is the important thing. So here example given is that kingdoms, there are two types of kingdoms, Animalia and Plantae. Now, of course, there are other kingdoms also according to five kingdom system, like fungi or the Monera or the Protista and so on, right? So for the instance, I have given just two things here, that is Animalia and the Plantae. Now let us go on to the next category. The next category or the next taxa is the phylum. Well, phylum is the primary subdivision of the kingdom, right? In which all groups or the classes of the organisms that have same body plan are placed together. What does it mean? Let us understand it with the help of this example. See, I said there is a kingdom Animalia, right? Animalia, which is comprised of all different types of animals. Now, as I already explained that animals can be of different types. So, depending upon its most prominent feature, this Animalia is divided into two groups. And what are those groups? That is, one of it is Chordata and the another one is actually the non-Chordata. So this kingdom Animalia is divided into two subphylums, that is Chordata and the non-Chordata. Chordata is the one which is having the notochord. In higher chordates, this notochord is replaced by the vertebral column. So I hope that it will be more clear for you to understand it with respect to the this vertebral column. There are the organisms in which the traces of this vertebral column or the notochord is completely absent. So those organisms are placed in the another phylum that is known as the non-chordata. I hope it is very clear now. Another point is that this term phylum, as I already said to you, that the term phylum is it is replaced by the term division when we are discussing about the subclassification of the plants. So over there, kingdom Plantae, it will be subdivided into division. Division, let me say, like angiosperms. Angiosperms, that is the flowering plants, right? They are bearing the seeds which are enclosed inside the fruits. So that is the one of the division, right? So whenever studying about animals, use the term phylum, and whenever you are studying about the plants, always use the term division. Now further, let us see how this phylum is subclassified. Yeah, one important thing is that the number of organisms which are present in the phylum, it will be less than that of the kingdom, because now that has been subdivided. And the second thing is that the number of similar features is more in the phylum as compared to the organisms present in the kingdom. So of course there will be dissimilarities also. When we are going down this hierarchy level, you will see that the number of organisms are reducing and the number of similarities among that small group is now increasing. That is the beauty of this classification. So now let us see the next taxa. Well, the next one is the class. This class is the primary subdivision of the phylum, right? And it is further subdivided into two or more orders, right? That means it is a subdivision which is present between the phylum and the order, right? And of course they are the number of organisms, it will now keep on decreasing, so it is having more similar organisms which are less in number now in the class. So as we continue, let us continue. Like kingdom is, if it is Animalia, phylum is Chordata. Then in Chordata, there will be a class that is Mammalia. Of course, there are more other classes also, like Amphibia, or there is a superclass also actually, that is Tetrapoda. In short, let me say one thing, that the phylum is subdivided into the class that is Mammalia, and this Mammalia is a group of organisms or the group of animals that give birth to the young ones, and they have the mammary glands. So this presence of mammary glands is a typical or the peculiar feature of the class Mammalia. All those organisms which are feeding their young ones by the milk or the mammary glands, the secretion of the mammary glands, they are coming under the group that is Mammalia. Fine. Now Mammalia is again further classified into different parts, different groups. I hope you know which animals are coming in this category. Cow, deer, lion, tiger, bear, rabbit, rats, human beings, so on. Now, among these examples that I have quoted here, you can see that there are differences among them also. It is, of course, there is a similarity, that is the mammary glands are present, the notochord is well developed, that is vertebral column is present, but there are a lot of dissimilarities also. And on the basis of those dissimilarities, the class is further subdivided. And which is the next rank in this this particular context? It is the order. So now in simple terms, you can just say order is a subdivision of class which is further subdivided into one or more families, right? Of course, now let us continue with this example. It is Animalia, that is a kingdom. Then phylum is Chordata, class is Mammalia. That is what we have studied till now, right? So the order, let me say one is Carnivora. There are the organisms I said, like cow, deer, dog, then the rats, then your tiger, lion, human beings, and so on. So one of the group is there which is completely dependent upon the plants for their nourishment. There is another class which is dependent upon animals for their own nourishment, like for this flesh of the other organisms, isn't it? Or there are the organisms which are obtaining their nourishment from other animals as well as from the plants, so they will be omnivorous. This is one of the criteria so as to subclassify the Mammalia. So order, it will be Carnivora. Carnivora, the animals that are dependent upon other animals for their nourishment. After order, next rank is the family. Family is defined as the collection of similar genera, or it is simply defined as the subdivision of the order, right? Now, of course, these type of organisms, they are further classified into the further rank also, right? Over here, the basic criteria to subclassify such organism is their reproductive nature. It is characterized, or it can be separated from different genera by their reproductive or the vegetative features. Let us see now here in the example. Animalia is the kingdom which is divided into Chordata and the non-Chordata. Chordata, one of the class is Mammalia. In Mammalia, there is one of the order that is Carnivora. Now, it is not only the single order here. There are other orders also. Fine. And in this, there is a small group that is known as the cats, or scientifically we can call them as the Felidae. So this is how they are subclassified. Now there are different types of organisms also, like there are the rodents, there are the organisms which are canines, which are having the canine teeth also, or canis I can say. Actually there are the different criteria, different classes, or these groups further. Fine. So all cats, they are forming a single group, that is Felidae. Can you think of some example which are coming under this group cat? That is the normal domestic cat, tiger, then the leopard, lion. All these are coming in this particular category. So now further, depending on their different features, they are subclassified into the genus. So genus is basically a group of similar species, right? And of course these species, it is not necessary that genus is made up of a single species or more than that. It may be comprised of a single species, so that is known as the monotypic genera, or it may be comprised of more than single species, which is known as the polytypic genera. Fine. In this example, as I said, Felidae is a family, and in that case, one of the genus is the Panthera. Now, Panthera, which organisms are coming in this group? Like leopard or the tiger, and so on. right? So these tigers or these domestic cats, all these are actually the they are going to be the species. And species, what is the species? Let me show you. Well, species is a group of similar organisms that is completely similar to each other, which are actually, the species is defined as that group of similar organisms which are able to interact, perpetuate with each other, and interbreed. So those which are able to participate in the process of reproduction, they are said to belong to the same species. So here is the example. Now among in this genus Panthera, I have just shown the subclassification, that is the species is Panthera tigris. So here is this picture, that is tiger. So this tiger is having this type of complete classification. If you have to represent it, it is, I mean, this is a code for this particular organism. So this is how this hierarchy is actually maintained. There is a group, then further when some there is similarity with other organisms, they are grouped together in a single group. So you can understand this concept in the ascending order or in the descending order. That is from either kingdom to species or species to kingdom. Whatever you are studying, the concept should be very clear. So this is how it is, this hierarchy is established among the different groups of organisms. So rest will continue in the next session. Till then, thank you so much. Have a nice day. Goodbye. See you in the next session.